Happy Pride, readers. Welcome to Pride Book Fest. I'm Jenn Butler. My pronouns are we, us, our, homie. And this is how you use my pronouns in a sentence. Jenn has a really nice tie. I wonder where we, they, or homie got it from. I am the Community Mobilization Associate here at GLSEN, and this is PPF OUTburst, GLSEN'S Rainbow Library. For folks who cannot see us on this video, I am wearing a blue and red plaid shirt with a red tie and a black hoodie. The background behind me is a bluish wall with the very tip of a corner of a painting that features people walking around in a town square. I am currently residing on Lenape land, and thank you for being here. I am so excited to have with me here Michael Rady, he, him, and Amina KP, she, her. Michael is the program manager for GLSEN'S Rainbow Library. Before taking on this role, he was a third grade teacher, curriculum writer, and worked as an education policy staffer for Senator Cory Booker. Amina KP is a member of the GLSEN National Student Council, a group that organizes GLSEN programming and campaigns, offers valuable insight to GLSEN staff and board of directors, and shares their stories with leaders in the LGBTQ movement, from policymakers to the media. Today, Michael and Amina will talk with us about their work with GLSEN and how we can support schools and students to better access and take advantage of LGBTQ+ affirming books. First off, what is GLSEN? Well, GLSEN is the leading national organization that advocates for schools to be safe and inclusive for LGBTQ+ students. Founded in 1990, GLSEN's national network is more than 1.5 million strong, with students, families, educators, and education advocates working together to create safe schools. GLSEN does work across a lot of areas, from providing professional development to educators to leading national days of action, including Day of Silence and Solidarity Week. Today, we'll be focusing on two aspects of GLSEN's work: the Rainbow Library and the National Student Council. And with that, I will pass it over to Michael to tell us more about the Rainbow Library.
Thank you so much, Jenn. So my name is Michael Rady. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am currently in Nashville, Tennessee on Cherokee land. For the folks who cannot see the screen today, I am a white person with short brown hair, and I'm wearing a green collared shirt. Jenn, again, thanks so much for the introduction and for moderating this outburst. And Amina, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy, time right after high school to be here today with us. I'm tremendously grateful to be part of this conversation. So what is the Rainbow Library? So the Rainbow Library is a program from GLSEN that sends LGBTQ+ affirming book sets out to schools and libraries across the country for free. So we know that there's a huge demand for these LGBTQ+ affirming books at schools and libraries. Every couple years, GLSEN does this national school climate survey of LGBTQ+ youth. And they found in their most recent survey that less than half of students said that they have access to LGBTQ related library resources at school. Just 19% of students surveyed said that they were taught positive representations of LGBTQ people, history, or events at school. And we also know that students at schools with LGBTQ+ inclusive curriculum, which includes LGBTQ+ affirming books, face lower levels of depression, have higher grade point averages, and are less likely to report missing school due to feeling unsafe, among a whole host of other, positive outcomes for having these LGBTQ+ affirming books and inclusive curriculum at their school. So the Rainbow Library, inside the box, we send each school or library recipient a poster with our logo and the covers of all the Rainbow Library books that are included in the box, as well as logos and access to a state-specific Rainbow Library website where they can tap into other local LGBTQ+ affirming resources. Inside of each book, so this is one of our high school books, for example, you'll see that there is a sticker saying that the book is part of the Rainbow Library. So a student that picks up this book and starts to read it knows that, they could check out other books that are part of this collection and also go online to access more resources, some of which are from GLSEN. So we have 4 different grade ranges in terms of our sets. We have kindergarten through 2nd grade, third grade through fifth grade, sixth grade through eighth grade, and ninth grade through 12th grade. Right now, we are in 800 schools and libraries across 5 states. We started in Connecticut in 2019 and have grown steadily since then. And this fall, we'll be growing to 3 additional states. So we'll be in 8 states. And so by the end of the 2021-2022 school year, we are aiming to be in over 2,800 schools and libraries across the country. So that's the Rainbow Library for you. And now I'll pass it back to you, Jen.
Thank you, Michael. I remember being invited to the Rainbow Library packaging party, and I believe it was in the grade 1-9. Feels like a whole different time. But I remember coming out there, and it was dope. It was the GLSEN homies. It was like volunteers that came out. It was so many books everywhere. People like rolling posters. People are like sorting books. You had different generations. You had the youths, and it was intergenerational. It felt really good, and there was just like this wave in my heart or in my belly, just knowing that these books were going out there, and they were going to be in the hands of youth who needed it, who could very well really use it. Well, I knew I could have used it when I was a youth, and I even remember we had a little raffle. A homie might have won a copy of Sister Outsider, and that's what I'm saying. That's the access, right? So how do we make these stories, and how do we make all this accessible to younger homies like me, or when I was, or anybody, or you, or anybody, to really have that and be able to because these books reshape our mind, and they open our minds, and they open our hearts, and they start conversations, and they really foster a sense of connections. So right now, I'm going to pass over to Amina KP to introduce herself and tell us about her work with GLSEN'S National Student Council.
Okay, hi, my name is Mina, and as Jen already noted, I am a member of the GLSEN National Student Council. I currently reside on the land of the Manahoac people, also known as Northern Virginia. For listeners who can't see us on this webinar, I am biracial Indian and Caucasian, have long dark brown hair, wear red glasses, and have on a black shirt. I have always been drawn to LGBTQ plus activism, being a queer person myself. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I wanted to ensure that I continued my work virtually. So I applied for the GLSEN National Student Council. Jen already gave a pretty apt description of the National Student Council earlier. I work with other members of the NSC to develop GSA and other teen-targeted GLSEN programming throughout the school year. This includes No Name Calling Week, bi-monthly bulletins on Instagram Live, and blogs discussing various relevant topics. I recently wrote a blog about Asian American and Pacific Islander queer representation in literature, or the lack thereof, and other NSC members partake in other events. So some will work with media to put out articles, others will work on different weeks, and others will work with companies like Hollister to promote inclusivity in clothing as well.
Well, thank you, Amina. Thank you for that. Well, I know this work can be hard, especially with this year, with all the hateful legislation coming out against trans youth. I want to ask though, can each of you share a story that can give us hope? How have you seen your work, either with the Rainbow Library or with the National Student Council, positively impact LGBTQ plus students?
So I just want to say, first of all, we are here to support you. Especially, trans youth who have been so targeted this past year by state legislatures across the country. It's been a really, really tough 2021. More anti-trans bills have been introduced this year than ever before in the history of this country. So, we know it's hard, and we're there for you, and we will continue fighting with you. And so in terms of the Rainbow Library and positive stories of hope, we have some really great data on the impact of the Rainbow Library so far. So we roll out a survey that we send to teachers and school librarians that received Rainbow Libraries in the past. And just from that data, we have some really promising results. One point that I really like to look at is over 97% of the Rainbow Library recipients agreed that the Rainbow Library made their school or library a safer and more inclusive place for LGBTQ plus young people. And there was also this huge uptick in all these wraparound supports for LGBTQ plus youth after receiving a Rainbow Library, because when we send out the sets, we also send all these accompanying resources from GLSEN, including stickers, posters, excerpts from our Safe Space Kit. And so one thing that we're really excited about is that there is a 9% increase in the likelihood that a student has access to an openly LGBTQ plus staff member after receiving a Rainbow Library. There's also a 16% increase in the percentage of staff members that have been trained on LGBTQ plus inclusiveness after receiving a Rainbow Library, and a 30% increase in there being a visual that affirms LGBTQ plus identities. So that's all just the data on the positive impacts of this program for LGBTQ plus youth that participate in it. On top of that, we have a bunch of really moving anecdotes about the impact of this program and GLSEN services for LGBTQ plus students across the country. There was this one example where we heard that there was a student in Atchison County, Kansas, pretty rural, that saw the Spanish edition of Juliet Takes a Breath, which is one of the books we send out with our high school set. And so she saw this book on her library shelf and she cried because she's someone that reads in Spanish and had never seen an LGBTQ plus affirming YA book in Spanish before in her life. There was another librarian that told us that she had rolled out the Rainbow Library books at her school library on a Friday, and by Monday, they were all checked out. There is another, and this just exposes all the pent up demand for LGBTQ plus affirming K-12 books across the country. One other stat that we really get excited about is that at 2/3 of our recipient schools and libraries, they purchase more LGBTQ plus affirming books because of the Rainbow Library, because they're so popular. We heard so many stories of students coming out to their school librarian or public librarian because they see that they have these books, they have this poster. We heard this one situation where there was an anti-LGBTQ bullying situation at a school, and the student had gone to the school librarian because they knew that they were supportive of LGBTQ plus people. And also this program has been really effective at helping administrators, teachers, librarians connect with GLSEN chapters when they do see pushback in their communities, whether it's from a parent or a hostile administrator. They're able to connect with us on the ground in their state or with our national office to be able to have the resources they need to be able to advocate for LGBTQ plus students. On top of that, in terms of just the impact for LGBTQ plus youth, we've seen that this program has catalyzed broader local and statewide policy changes. We've heard from curriculum directors at various districts in different states asking us for our lists and working with us to be able to incorporate Rainbow Library books, some of the Rainbow Library books, into their ELA curricula. So all students would be reading those books. This hasn't happened everywhere, but there have been some pockets where that's happened. And in Connecticut, where this program started in 2019 and we're in every corner of the state, there's now a bill in the works that's pretty close to getting passed that would establish a model K-8 curriculum that includes LGBTQ plus studies. So we're really excited about the impact, and we're going to keep fighting to keep going.
Okay, so I don't know if I have the same number of statistics to assess my impact, and so I think it can be hard for me to understand the impact I and the rest of the NSC have sometimes. Not only are we spread across the country and have never met in person, but most of us have also been completely virtual at school this year, and a lot of the time, the easiest place to see impacts is at GSAs. And that's a lot harder to see this year because a lot of GSAs either aren't running or are running in a very different capacity to the way they used to. So it's also hard to see the impact we've had within our own schools. I think the moment that I realized I am positively impacting queer students is during GLSEN Bulletins, which are Instagram lives that just discuss a specific topic. One bulletin I was on focused on identity as a whole and not necessarily using specific terms to identify oneself, as well as fluidity both in sexuality and gender. It's a topic I have a very strong personal connection to, and it's something that I feel doesn't get discussed enough in queer spaces, and it's becoming a larger topic, and it's becoming more commonly discussed, but it's still not talked about enough, not pressuring people to identify a specific way or find a label for themselves. And I think that's really important for teens to get, because that's often who the most pressure is often placed on young people who are just beginning to figure themselves out, just figure their personalities out at a base level. And at the same time, they're also being pressured to understand their sexuality and their gender identity. And seeing the positive messages during the live, both in support of myself, but also in relating to my experiences, were really the first time I realized I was positively impacting other queer students. And it's one of the only spaces where we can realize that at the time and very quickly. But it did allow, it really clicked in my head. I was like, oh, this is helping people. And we are helping spread awareness. We are helping spread support. And we do have a larger impact than we may think.
Facts upon facts upon facts. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Amina KP. We appreciate y'all, and that. For me, I mean, the positive. I don't have the statistics either. I don't have direct, like I'm not part of the NSC squad, you know. But from where I've been at, or from the interactions I've had, the positive impact, I wonder how we quantify. It's a feeling. And I know a lot of times we live in a world where it's like facts, not feelings. But there is this sense of, I want to say, liberation or even safety, when you realize that, one, there are people there who like support and affirm you, right? And who are there to give you the access to the information, you know, that you need, which is dope about the Rainbow Library. But also being able to be in an environment where you're not, like Amina was talking about, in these boxes. I'm not sure if this is what you were, you know, going towards, but the being able to pick your own box. Like, I could pick my own book, I could pick my own box, I could do what I want to do, I could be where I want to be, in that sense of being an individual. And that's what happens, and what my belief, when we read books, it's just us in the book. It's the words of somebody who is either no longer with us, or words that were maybe even space traveling, you know, sorry to get all, you know, with it. But, you know, these are words that came from a different time. And here I am in my own time, and I'm reading them. And what happens is, when we read these books, we realize that, hey, we are a lot more alike than the constructs in the society that we live have brought us or led us to believe. So I just want to say thank you, y'all. And just add in my own little, you know, couple of cents if y'all wanted to know what I thought. Let's lead me to the next question. Can you talk about the importance of LGBTQ plus and BIPOC, BIPOC, which is also, if folks don't know, Black and Indigenous people of color, representation in books and curriculum?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think at a very basic level, and I'll split this into two, books and curriculum, because I feel like there are different aspects to curriculum that are not necessarily just books. And I think in books and in like common reading literature, having access to media that shows diversity, and it's improving. It's definitely better than when I was, say, 10, which wasn't that long ago now that I think about it. But while it's definitely improving, there's still a lot of gaps. And as someone whose sexuality falls outside the LGB, I have never found a book that accurately represents me. And in the blog post I mentioned briefly earlier about AAPI specific queer representation in books, there are very, very few books about any Asian and Pacific Islanders, and not just East Asian, not just Southeast Asian, but all of Asia. There's very, very little representation when it comes to people of color, especially in queer books, and especially queer people who fall outside the LGB and the T. And it makes it very difficult to feel comfortable in yourself, because when you can't connect your experiences to someone else, when you can't say, oh, when you don't feel validated because you're told, oh, you either can only be attracted to someone of the opposite gender, or you're told, well, there are these other sexualities that are also okay, but we're not going to discuss anything outside the LGB and T. It feels very restrictive, and I ended up feeling almost forced into trying to understand where I fell in terms of my sexuality. And it's not comfortable. And if representation in things like books increases, we are more ready to understand, oh, there are things outside of this, there are a lot more identities than just the LGBT, and it's okay not to identify a specific way. And that's another big thing for me, is not just specific identities outside of the LGBT, but also a lack of identity outside the LGBT, and not using a specific term to identify oneself. Because a lot of the time, a lot of books with queer representation focus on the queer experience and focus on coming out and focus on that being a massive strife in someone's life. But sometimes I just want to see, like, that can just be a side note. That doesn't have to be someone's entire life. That doesn't have to be their whole story. When all our books about queer people are about their struggles, we forget that queer people are also, at the end of the day, people and live lives outside of their queerness. And that also makes it really hard to read the books a lot of the time, because a lot of them, the books are very, very heavy. Even fiction can be really heavy, and that makes it really hard for people, especially people who have past trauma, who are struggling in other regards, to even read these books in the first place. And so it's not just we need to increase the perspectives in the queer community, but we also need to increase the topics discussed in queer literature, aside from just trauma, because that becomes not necessarily problematic, but it becomes difficult past a certain point. And then when it comes to curriculum, there's several areas of curriculum that need improvement. Obviously, English classes need improvement. I think English classes need improvements in many ways. The majority of the books I've read in high school were by white people, and the majority of those were by old white men. And so at a baseline, that needs to be improved, especially with queer literature, because not everyone reads a lot, which is fair. Reading isn't everyone's shtick. But if we have to read for English classes anyways, when we are told that the norm is this perspective of white people, of whiteness, it normalizes whiteness and normalizes cishetness, if you will. And then anything else becomes sort of a tangent from that. I think if people aren't going to read outside of school, school should at the very least provide that diversity, provide those perspectives for people. And then when outside of that specific curriculum, outside of English curriculum, history curriculum as well needs to improve, because the erasure of, and this also relates to books because it comes up in textbooks, the erasure of queer people in history makes it seem as though being queer is a recent phenomenon, which it very much is not. And it makes it seem as though it is unique to this society, when in reality, many past societies have had different acceptances of queer people, especially societies that are not quote unquote Western, if you will, have had many different perspectives on queerness, and a lot of much more inclusive perspectives on queerness. But when we make it seem like our queerness now is so progressive and so new and really new and didn't used to exist in the same way, we lose a lot of our awareness. We lose a lot of our understanding of the world and how it works, and the fact that queer people are not new. Queer people have been around since people have been around. And so, yeah, diversity is incredibly important, and especially with queer individuals, especially with queer people of color. And while I think it's improving, it needs to improve a lot more before it gets to anywhere remotely reasonable.
Amina, thank you so much for saying all of that. It resonates so much how, we need intersectionality, right? Not only in the books that students can access in their school library or the ELA bookshelf, but in the curriculum that all students are taught, right? And that our teachers know to teach and to affirm, right? My heart is beating so much from what you just said. So thank you. So with regards to the question around BIPOC, LGBTQ plus representation in literature, I used to be a third grade teacher in Newark, New Jersey, where almost all of my students were Black, Latinx, or multiracial. And, when I was starting this project with the folks at GLSEN, Connecticut, I put a real emphasis in my brain about making sure that we had a heavy emphasis on BIPOC, LGBTQ plus representation in the books that we had. And the thing is that the most commonly known LGBTQ plus affirming K-12 books are about cis, white, mostly men, right? And that's not who the students are in America today. We know that over half of American public students are Black or brown and are students of color. And we need to make sure, like, we know about mirrors and windows, and we need to make sure that the LGBTQ plus affirming books represent the spectrum of experiences in the LGBTQ plus community. So over half of the books that we have on the Rainbow Library list center voices of queer people of color. I have some of them right here. So All Boys Aren't Blue is one of them. Felix Ever After is another one. This is one of my favorites, Cuando Amamos Cantamos. It's in English and Spanish. We had the author at our recent Rainbow Reader Summit. So that's where we're at and the work that we're trying to do. That being said, I'd also add that I'm seeing more and more LGBTQ plus affirming books written by Black, Indigenous, people of color, API authors, especially in the lower elementary and the high school range. But I really want to see more books in the upper elementary space that are written by BIPOC, LGBTQ plus people. And I know these are barriers that are raised by the publishing industry, which is overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly presenting these tremendous barriers for Black and brown authors to get published. So definitely, if you're watching this and you're in the publishing industry, please do the work, keep doing the work, because we will buy those books and send them to schools. So that's what I gotta say on this. It's something that we're fighting for, and I'm really grateful for all the players in this space. Like, we need diverse books that are continuing to light a fire under the feet of the people in power in order to make sure that there is increased LGBTQ plus BIPOC representation in the books that we see in schools and libraries.
Michael, Amina, thank you for that. We appreciate you. I'm so glad that we are together here in this work. Intersectionality is very important as we rethink, reimagine, and reshape our culture, our society, and it all, the foundation of it all is the safe and affirming spaces. So for some and a lot of homies, these books become safe and affirming places to really explore the thoughts that we may not be able to normally, we probably wouldn't have thought about. And also have conversations, like I said earlier, have conversations. And this is important for people on all sides of it. Whether or not you're LGBTQ plus or BIPOC, read a book. You'll, might learn about somebody else's world. So no pressure there either, or listen to a book too, because, some homies do better with listening. I'm a homie that does better with listening to books. Okay. So thank you. So just we expect our students, we expect our audience today to be made up of mostly LGBTQ plus students, as well as supportive teachers and librarians. Amina and Michael, what should viewers do to get involved in your work? Like, how do we jump in?
For all students watching this, head to GLSEN.org, that's GLSEN.org. And while you're there, 1, register to get free GSA resources. 2, join the youth membership program. And 3, fill out the National School Climate Survey to share about your experience as an LGBTQ plus student.
Thanks so much, Amina. I will co-sign everything Amina just said. And especially to all the teachers and librarians and other school staff watching, also head to GLSEN.org, subscribe to get GLSEN updates. Also, please head to rainbowlibrary.org. Submit a request for a Rainbow Library set. If you're in one of the states that we're in right now, you can go to the website and see. Also, I encourage you to donate to the GLSEN Rainbow Library, and that's rainbowlibrary.org/donate, so we can get more LGBTQ plus affirming books to schools and libraries across the country. And if you want to purchase an individual Rainbow Library book, like Cuando Amamos Cantamos, for yourself or a loved one, you can go to our bookshop storefront at rainbowlibrary.org/buy.
And that's a wrap for our Outburst. Thank you both, Amina and Michael. Thank you so much for taking time to chat with us today. And to our viewers, you remember what the homies just said? head to glisten.org. That's GLSEN.org and rainbowlibrary.org to get involved with our work and to make schools more supportive for LGBTQ plus students. What else can I say, homies, other than happy Pride, everybody?